Admiral Cothran stood on the observation deck of the Confederacy flagship, his forearms crossed in amusement. Through the massive viewport, he watched the approaching human fleet with something between pity and contempt. The vessels were small, blocky, and utterly unremarkable. They looked like cargo transports compared to the elegant warships of the Confederacy. "Sir, the human ambassador is requesting communication," his communications officer reported. Cothran waved a dismissive hand. "Let them speak. I want the entire bridge to hear this." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a human female in a simple gray uniform. Her expression was calm, almost bored. Behind her, Cothran could see the cramped interior of what passed for a human command ship. "Admiral Cothran," she began, "I am Ambassador Sarah Chun of the United Earth Fleet. We are here to negotiate the release of the human colonists you have taken from the Kepler system. We request a peaceful resolution to this matter." Laughter erupted across the Confederacy bridge. Officers of 3 different species found humor in the absurdity of the request. Cothran allowed himself a thin smile. "Ambassador Chun," he replied, his translator converting his words into human speech. "You'd come to negotiate with 7 vessels against my fleet of 200. Your largest ship is smaller than my escort frigates. Your weapons are primitive chemical propulsion systems. Your shields are laughable. What exactly do you believe gives you standing to make demands?" The human woman did not flinch. Her eyes remained steady, locked on his through the holographic link. "We are not making demands, Admiral. We are offering you a choice. Return our people, and we leave peacefully. Refuse, and you will discover why every species that has attacked humanity has regretted it." More laughter filled the bridge. Cothran's second-in-command, a reptilian creature named Voshtik, leaned close and whispered, "Should we destroy them now, Admiral?" "It would take mere moments." Cothran shook his head. "No, let them witness our full power first. I want these humans to understand what they face. Perhaps the survivors can spread word of our might among their primitive kind." He addressed the ambassador again. "Your colonists are now property of the Confederacy. They will serve in our labor camps for the next 50 cycles. This is not negotiable. As for your threat, I find it amusing. Your species has been in space for barely 300 years. We have ruled this sector for 12,000. Go home, little humans. Go home before I decide to make an example of your fleet." The ambassador's expression did not change. She simply nodded once, as if she had expected this response. "Very well, Admiral. We gave you the choice. Remember that in the hours to come." The communication ended. Cothran turned to his bridge crew, spreading his forearms wide. "You see? This is why humanity will never amount to anything. They bluster and threaten, but when faced with true power, they have nothing. Their ships are ugly boxes of metal. Their weapons are antiques. Their people are soft and emotional." Voshtik nodded in agreement. "Shall the First order the fleet to firing positions, Admiral?" "Yes, but do not destroy them immediately. Disable their engines first. I want to board those ships and show these humans what happens to species that challenge the Confederacy." The Confederacy fleet moved into attack formation with practiced precision. 200 warships arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around the 7 human vessels. Each Confederacy ship was 3 times the size of the largest human craft. Their weapon systems hummed with energy, ready to unleash devastation. On the human flagship, Ambassador Chun walked calmly from the communication room to the bridge. Captain James Morrison looked up from his command chair. "I assume they refused?" he asked. "They did," Chun confirmed. "As expected." Morrison nodded slowly. He was an older man, his hair gray, his face lined with decades of experience. He had served in the Earth Defense Force since before humanity had developed faster than light travel. He had seen many things in his career, but he had never felt more confident than he did at this moment. "All ships," he announced over the fleet-wide channel, "begin Protocol Omega. Time to show these gentlemen what human engineering looks like when we stop holding back. Across the 7 human ships, massive panels began sliding away from their hulls. What the Confederacy had dismissed as primitive cargo vessels were revealing their true nature. The blocky exteriors had been nothing but camouflage, disguising the most advanced weapon systems humanity had ever created. On the Confederacy flagship, alarms began screaming. "Admiral," an officer shouted, "the human ships are transforming. We are detecting massive energy signatures." Cawthron rushed to the sensor display, his confidence crumbling as he watched the readings climb. The power output from a single human ship now exceeded his entire fleet combined. That was impossible. That was beyond impossible. "Fire," he commanded. "All ships fire immediately." 200 Confederacy warships unleashed their weapons simultaneously. Plasma bolts, particle beams, and nuclear missiles raced toward the human fleet from every direction. It was enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The human ships did not move. They did not attempt to evade. Instead, a shimmering field of energy surrounded each vessel, a technology the Confederacy had never encountered. The massive barrage struck the shields and simply vanished, absorbed without effect. "Admiral, their shields are absorbing everything. Our weapons are having no impact." Cawthron felt something he had not experienced in 3 centuries of warfare. Fear. True, genuine fear. On the human flagship, Captain Morrison watched the enemy fire harmlessly splash against their barriers. He felt no satisfaction, only grim determination. The Confederacy had enslaved human colonists. They had mocked humanity as primitive and weak. They had refused every attempt at peaceful negotiation. Now they would learn the truth. "Return fire," Morrison ordered. "All ships, execute attack pattern Delta. Priority targets are their command vessels. Let the smaller ships watch what happens to those who threaten human lives." The human fleet responded with devastating precision. Beams of coherent light erupted from their weapons, each one carrying more energy than the total output of a small star. The Confederacy flagship was the first to die, its shields collapsing in a microsecond before the entire vessel was vaporized. One moment Cawthron existed, the next he was nothing but expanding particles of superheated gas. Bostick barely had time to register his admiral's death before the beam found his own ship. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted exactly 17 minutes. The human fleet moved through the Confederacy formation like wolves through sheep. Ship after ship exploded, their advanced technology proving utterly useless against weapons they could not comprehend. Some Confederacy vessels attempted to flee, engaging their faster-than-light drives in desperation. The human ships locked onto their energy signatures and fired through subspace itself, destroying them before they could complete their jumps. When it ended, nothing remained of the 200-ship fleet but scattered debris and drifting wreckage. Not a single Confederacy vessel had survived. Not a single human ship had been damaged. Captain Morrison surveyed the destruction without pride. "Locate the prison ships," he ordered. "Our colonists are on one of the support vessels behind the main fleet." "Found them, Captain. 3 transport ships approximately 2 million kilometers from our position. They are not responding to communications. Set course. Prepare boarding teams." The human fleet moved toward the transports, their true nature now fully visible. These were not the primitive vessels the Confederacy had mocked. These were weapons of war designed by a species that has survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and near extinction a dozen times over. Humanity had not advanced into space because they were peaceful. They had advanced because they were survivors, adapters, and, when necessary, destroyers. The transport ships did not resist. Their Confederacy crews surrendered immediately upon seeing what had happened to their fleet. The human colonists, over 12,000 men, women, and children, were freed from the cargo holds where they had been stored like animals. Ambassador Chun stood in the docking bay as the first colonists came aboard. A young mother carrying a small child stopped before her, tears streaming down her face. "They told us no one was coming," the woman whispered. "They said humanity was too weak to save us. They said we would die in their labor camps." Chun placed a gentle hand on the woman's shoulder. "They were wrong. Humanity always comes for its own. Always." News of the battle spread across the galaxy within days. The Confederacy had been one of the most powerful alliances in known space. Their fleet had been destroyed utterly by a species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers. Other powers took notice. The Varix Empire, which had been considering military action against human colonies, quietly canceled their plans. The Thrall Dominion sent formal diplomatic envoys for the first time in their history. Species that had ignored humanity for centuries suddenly found reason to establish trade relations. On Earth, the destruction of the Confederacy fleet was met with neither celebration nor triumph. The government released a simple statement acknowledging the rescue of the colonists and expressing hope that future conflicts could be resolved peacefully. But in the halls of the United Earth Parliament, in the classified briefings that never reached public ears, military leaders spoke in grave tones. The weapons used against the Confederacy were not new. They had existed for nearly a century. Humanity had simply chosen never to reveal them, hoping they would never be needed. The human species had learned long ago that revealing true strength invited challenges. It was better to appear weak, to let potential enemies believe they had the advantage. Only when threatened directly would humanity show what it could truly do. Admiral Thompson, commander of Earth's defensive forces, addressed the assembled leaders. The Confederacy made two mistakes. First, they believed our appearance reflected our capability. Second, they harmed human civilians. We cannot allow either mistake to go unanswered, but we must also ensure this does not escalate into wider war. A senator raised her hand. "What do you recommend?" "We recommend what we have always recommended. Return to appearing weak. Let the galaxy believe the Confederacy was an exception, a lucky victory. Continue developing our technologies in secret. Humanity survives not by conquering, but by being ready for any threat." The Parliament voted unanimously to accept the recommendation. In the weeks that followed, human ships once again traveled to space lanes looking like primitive cargo vessels. Human diplomats continued presenting their species as young and inexperienced. Human colonies continued appearing vulnerable and undefended. But across the galaxy, in the command rooms of 100 different species, military planners quietly updated their threat assessments. The Confederacy had mocked human ships. Now, the Confederacy existed only as debris orbiting a distant star. No one wanted to become the next example of what humanity could do when provoked. Captain Morrison retired 6 months after the battle. He spent his remaining years in a quiet colony world, tending a small garden and watching his grandchildren play under an alien sun. He never spoke publicly about what had happened, never sought recognition or fame. When asked once by a curious journalist why humanity had hidden its true power for so long, Morrison had simply smiled and offered a quote from ancient Earth history. "Walk softly," he said, "but carry a big stick. Humanity carries the biggest stick in the galaxy. We just prefer not to use it." The journalist had not published the quote. Some truths were too dangerous to share. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, human engineers continued their work, developing weapons that made the Confederacy battle look like a minor skirmish. Because humanity had learned the greatest lesson of survival. There was always a bigger threat somewhere. And when that threat arrived, humanity intended to be ready. The universe was vast and ancient and filled with dangers beyond counting. But humanity had earned its place among the stars, the same way it had conquered every challenge in its long history. Through determination, through adaptation, and through an absolute refusal to accept defeat. The Confederacy had mocked their ships. The Imperial fleet had mocked their ashes. And somewhere, in the cold silence of space, Humanity watched and waited, ready for whatever came next.